Luigi's Mansion 3 is a game I've been very excited to play for a while now. I love the number 3, and holy shit, Luigi's in it too? If you guys are caught up in the lore, then you should know the story by now. I fucking love Luigi's Mansion. Everything about it is awesome, and I've replayed it so many times. It is a one-of-a-kind game that is one of my personal favorites. And then Dark Moon killed my family. Well, okay, I found it to be decently enjoyable, and it isn't a faithful sequel, so I was disappointed, blah blah blah. But I've heard a lot of great things about Luigi's Mansion 3 ever since it released in 2019. From what I've seen, the community seems to think that Dark Moon was a low point of the series, so that sounded promising. Especially since I've heard this game has a structure closer to the first game, and thank God it's on a home console, technically. It received lots of critical acclaim in 2019 from fans and critics alike, so in this review we'll be determining how good of a game it is and how it stacks up as a Luigi's Mansion game. This series, especially the first entry, is something I'm very passionate about, and this one has been in my backlog for a while now. As his stupid dumb stupid red brother would say, "Let's go! Okie dokie." Just like the other games, the story is simple, but let's talk about it first. It begins with Luigi going on vacation with Mario, Princess Peach, some Toads, and even the Polterpup from Dark Moon. I mean, I guess Luigi is just so much of a Chad that he forgave how annoying that dog was. And yeah, going on vacation. That's worked in their favor several times, hasn't it? Anyways, they're staying at this 5-star hotel called The Last Resort, and the owner, Helen Gravely, gives them a warm welcome. Surprisingly, this place isn't totally haunted, just look at the title screen. Never mind. I do kind of like how obvious it is at first that this place is kinda sus, but we'll talk about how it handles atmosphere and stuff later. Basically, Luigi is awoken at night to discover that Helen Gravely is King Boo's #1 fan, so she reawakens him from his Dark Moon portrait so he can get revenge on Luigi. All of his friends were captured and he's next in line, however. Also, the dog didn't get captured. Luigi stumbles around the hotel's basement to eventually discover Gadd and free him from his portrait. He gets Luigi all set up in his lab located in the underground parking lot, and after that, your goal to reach the top of the hotel and save all your friends by defeating King Boo and Helen Gravely is set in stone. To be honest though, I didn't think Helen Gravely was that interesting. Her personality basically just revolves around King Boo, who also didn't change much, since he's just trying to capture Luigi and company because he wants revenge. In the chance that we do get a 4th installment, I hope they try to do something more original with its plot. The Boos could be incorporated in some way, but I don't think we need another variation of King Boo trapping Mario in a painting. Moving on, yes, it's a hotel, not a mansion. What the hell, guys? Dark Moon had some locations far removed from a mansion beside the first location, so it really isn't that shocking, and the structure of a hotel can still be similar to how the mansion's design was set up in the first game. One of the main things people were looking forward to is the fact that it takes place in one huge building rather than being so segmented like Dark Moon. This also means the mission-based structure can kiss my ass goodbye. However, saying this game takes place in one interconnected hotel is really stretching it. Here's the kicker, all of these settings are in the same building. It follows the first game's structure in name only. The various floors are connected via an elevator so you can go from floor to floor just like that. However, it isn't one immersive location you can explore more and more of like the original. They wanted to take strides to follow closer to Luigi's Mansion 1, yet they also tried to make it as unhotel-like as possible, which is kinda ass backward. I mean, like, this game might as well be mission-based, just longer missions and not getting kicked out in between. There's no Metroidvania-like progression to be seen here, but at the end of the day, it's still a step up from Dark Moon since you don't get kicked out mid-exploration. Also, this game graphically and aesthetically looks really damn good. I really think this is one of the Switch's best-looking games, even nearly 3 years after release. Everything looks like a playable Pixar film. The lighting and character models look amazing. It's really surprising to see how smoothly this game runs. Meanwhile, games that don't look as good and are newer run worse somehow. It was prototyped for the Wii U, so I guess this game just had a lot of time in the oven. The cutscenes look fantastic too, and are also really entertaining, because everything I loved about Luigi's personality and mannerisms last game returns and then some. He's so expressive, and I love his lovable scaredy cat personality. I feel like Dark Moon actually had more cutscenes though. Maybe that was a product of the missions or something, but still. Everything from the facial animation to the charm and writing is just sublime, and there are so many characters because say it with with me, the portrait ghosts are back. Mostly in spirit because you never see them being framed like you would in Luigi's Mansion 1, but they serve the same purpose in both story and gameplay, and I really love that. So much of the first game's identity was lost with Dark Moon's cast of characters, or lack thereof really. Frankly, the premise in that game was kinda boring, since the game mostly revolves around Luigi doing Gadd's chores, and then they remember Mario exists at the end. It had a few Toads too. It was basically the Paper Mario sticker star of Luigi's Mansion, in more ways than one actually now that I think about it. This game has so many charming and cool characters, and it really makes the hotel feel actually lived in despite how weird everything else is about this setting. Dark Moon just felt so boring without these types of characters, and seeing them return is pretty awesome. This game has so much charming personality, I'd say it rivals the first game. Lots of funny ghosts, and Luigi is great to watch on screen. However, I do still miss the atmosphere of the first game. In that game, the ghosts didn't have super high-pitched voices. They made these weird noises, and they were sinister and out to get you. They weren't these goofballs just joking around and being all totally spooky, like these guys were threatening to Luigi. The halls were actually dark and filled with ghosts. Meanwhile, you had this moody track playing along with Luigi humming to himself in fear, which really completes the song. Something that really started to grind my gears in Luigi's Mansion 3, which I guess could also be said about Dark Moon, is how ghosts just spawn. Like out of nowhere, gates will just appear around the doors because the game is just saying, yep, it's time to fight the ghosts now. In the first game, whenever you'd walk into a new room, it would usually be populated by ghosts because it's in the dark. And sometimes vines would block the doors, but that's much more subtle than these vibrant gates. And like I said, the environments look nice and they're pretty good visually, but they're too well lit for these ghosts to even like exist. Ghosts are supposed to only dwell in the dark. That makes sense. That's how ghosts work. But in Luigi's Mansion 3 especially, ghosts just appear whenever they feel like it. And I'm ready to call them out. That's dumb. There's barely a difference in lighting between scenarios where you're fighting ghosts or just exploring. Even Dark Moon did this better to an extent. Like, bro, Luigi, why are you even using a flashlight at this point? It couldn't have been that hard to just have all these settings be like abandoned and haunted, right? Like, why not an abandoned castle or an abandoned greenhouse or an abandoned hotel? That would work much better for a series that's supposed to be about ghosts and stuff, especially since out of all three games, this one came out on the day of Halloween, and I'd argue it has the least spookiness to its name. Basically, Luigi's Mansion 3 has too many lights and the ghosts are too silly. This is the kind of professional video game analysis you guys subscribed for. I also believe the first game's mood and atmosphere helped with delivering its narrative. The spooky sense of mystery made the plot more interesting, since you're going into the game having no idea what happened to Mario, how this mansion exists, why it's haunted, and all that stuff. You uncover more as the game progresses, which encourages you to keep playing. I did enjoy the plot with all its characters and charm and the great animation. However, as a Luigi's Mansion game, I can't help but miss that game's uniquely spooky setting and atmosphere. It added a lot to the first game's identity and personality. Alright, let's talk about gameplay. I think we can start with the control though, because it's something I was hoping to see improve, and it definitely did. We're finally back to 2 analog sticks, which makes the game feel much better to play.
Yeah, suck on it, Dark Moon!
But for quick and easy vertical aim, the gyroscope still exists as an option. I didn't use it that much, but it's harmless. If you really hate it, just turn it off. Luigi's other moves return, like the stroll bulb and dark light, but they actually did something very brilliant and versatile with their button mapping by also having the ability like the stroll bulb and suction shot, more about it in a minute, mapped to the shoulder button, so you can use these abilities while still having access to both sticks, which is really nice. The strobe bulb was designed for the lack of turning while aiming on 3DS, but it still feels much more comfortable to play. And the dark light can be triggered by holding down both shoulder buttons at once, which gets a little cumbersome every now and then, since sometimes it just doesn't work and you look like an idiot. But I appreciate the effort, and when it works, it's much more comfortable than the claw grip resulting from using the face buttons and trying to turn Luigi. Also, they got rid of the arbitrary cooldown on the dark light, so you can infinitely use it, which is exactly how it should have been.
Yeah, suck on it again, Dark Moon!
The run button was also removed because the game didn't need it. However, it's not like Luigi always moves at top speed for some reason. Sometimes during exploration, he can start off with a walk and then transition into a jog, which still wasn't really needed. Can't he just have one consistent speed? Yeah, this is what I meant when I say the sequels aren't that similar to the first game. They changed how Luigi walks. Luigi runs during during combat though, so that was nice. But this one part with the seesaw kinda made me take damage because of this weird top speed conundrum. I don't need to gain momentum in Luigi's Mansion, guys. I'm not trying to dog on the control though, since I'd say it's obviously better than Dark Moon. And they did throw in some new moves and mechanics to play with in this game, most of which are pretty cool. First is the suction shot, where Luigi can aim and shoot a plunger out of the poltergust, actually making its first debut in a Smash reveal before the game was announced.
Oh my god, Luigi has a plunger! What the fuck is a Castlevania?
I'm especially glad this one was mapped to a shoulder button since it's seamlessly blended into exploration. You can only aim at specific things the game lets you aim at, and you can pull back for a slam to knock things over. It's fun to use and a cool new way you can interact with your surroundings and environment. Luigi can also do a burst move by pressing both trigger buttons, and it can blow away objects, showing off all the funny physics for the stuff around you. It's also used as a jump every now and then, not like Dark Moon's use for it during combat, more so just a defensive jump to dodge like shockwaves and stuff. It can also blow away ghosts if they're violating your personal space. I'd say it's a welcome addition to his moveset. More of a substantial mechanic new to this game is Gooigi, this spawnable clone of Luigi that Gadd kinda just like made somehow. Like yeah, he just gives you Gooigi out of nowhere in the beginning. I think it would have been more fitting if Luigi discovered Gooigi in the basement of the hotel or something, just to give him more of an interesting and mysterious aura, I guess. I don't know, his existence is just weird. Although I will say he was great to use for puzzle solving and exploration. You click the right stick to spawn him in as you switch control from Luigi to Gooigi. It may sound a bit janky switching from one to the other like that, but it works well. Gooigi mostly controls the same, it can do most things Luigi can do except touch water. But he also has less health and can slip through certain things like gates and iron bars to access areas Luigi can't reach himself. You can also do things like leave him idle but still use the poltergust if a puzzle or something calls for it. You can also get Gooigi to help you slam down objects that are too heavy for Luigi's own suction shot. It may not sound too exciting, but once they really start using Gooigi in tandem with Luigi, that's when it gets fun. The boiler room floor executed this very well, constantly having you use Gooigi's unique mechanics to diverse areas and help Luigi progress. Overall, Gooigi was quite a fun addition to the game. The ability to just clone yourself on the spot was used very well for lots of puzzles. All the floors you explore ended up being quite memorable in the end. It starts off pretty tame with the hotel setting, but quickly opens up lots of wacky areas, and the gimmicks featured in those were really cool, creatively using the poltergust and Luigi's other moves. No two floors are the same when it comes to both aesthetics and gameplay. One floor will see you exploring an ancient tomb as you suck up lots of sand and avoid booby traps, sometimes against the clock. Then you'll be playing with floaties in the water as Luigi and Gooigi help each other traverse in the boiler room. Or you'll be fighting a shark ghost that possesses a ship and tries to attack you with that. Or you'll be in fancy suites dealing with these magicians and their wacky puzzles and mazes across the floor. The final floor was pretty fun too. It has lasers you must traverse around, and you have to explore different rooms and solve their own puzzles to get the keys they hold. One very creative level I just really needed to mention is the movie studio, where you get to use blue screens that entirely transform into these cool scenes where you can use Gooigi to play in them, and it borrows the portal gimmick from the Treacherous Mansion in Dark Moon, so you'll be carrying items across sets, and it was so damn cool. Not to mention you can jump into the TV. And it gets even better. Instead of a traditional boss fight, you help this starving film director, Morty, film his magnum opus where you have to fight Godzilla and even have a beam struggle, and it's so fucking cool. And you don't even have to kill Morty. If you just let him chill in his office, then later on he'll actually edit your fight and you could watch it.
Okay, that level was actually pretty awesome. I don't really think I have the strength to kill this guy.
A few minutes later.
Okay, so for the most part, the pacing in this game was good. But at one point in development, someone must have realized that it was too good, so they threw in the Polter Kitty, where she pops up twice in the game to just steal your elevator button, resulting in you having to backtrack through multiple floors without any new substance. That's right, guys, they brought back my favorite part of Dark Moon! They must have thought the issue with the Polterpup wasn't the fact that it's very damn tedious searching rooms you've already explored for the sake of padding out the length of the game with an extra mission. It was the fact that it was a dog. I mean, I love dogs and cats, but come on, guys, this is fucking boring. There's no mission structure, so what's even the point if you don't get a few extra missions out of it? These were easily the lowest points in the entire game. Going onto one floor and catching the Polter Kitty just for it to phase through the floor again is not fun.
Never have I enjoyed animal cruelty this much in a video game.
Gadd also makes you backtrack to the boiler room at one point, but it's forgivable since you explore new areas, so it's not bad. It also brings back the toads from Dark Moon, and you get to launch them like an Angry Bird. So besides this asshole, I'd say the experience of exploring the environment was actually more fun and satisfying than in Dark Moon. It has fun new abilities to play with like Gooigi, no intrusive structure, much less filler, and very creative and memorable settings and puzzles. When it comes to the gameplay of Luigi's Mansion 3, I'd say this is the best part. The other part...
I mean, it's alright, like...
I had high expectations for this game's combat. We're actually on console now, technically, so that means we have a good analog stick to play with, technically, so hopefully it's an improvement over Dark Moon. Combat is initiated once the game just randomly locks you in a room with ghosts, and to catch the ghosts, you must flash them with your stroll bulb, which you can charge for a wider radius, and then begin sucking by pulling the analog stick against them. But now they added this new phase where you actually have to get very close to the ghost, which is kind of weird and I wasn't the biggest fan of it. In Luigi's Mansion 1 without the stroll bulb, it was ideal to be close to the ghost because that meant flashing them, and timing it would be easier like that since if you're far away that gives them a better chance of escaping, but I thought that system was fine. And when some other ghosts require you to get behind them entirely, that just becomes kinda cumbersome. This process also makes catching multiple ghosts at once much more of a rare occurrence and not as simple to achieve as in Dark Moon. Also in Dark Moon it was much more rewarding, but more about that later. This isn't something that really pisses me off, but I just don't think it adds much. By pulling back against the ghost for long enough, you can charge up a new slam move where you press A to slam the ghost onto the ground, dealing 20 damage, and you get about 4 slams to add up to 80. That's a good chunk of most ghosts' health. Inherently, slamming the ghost does give you a boost of dopamine since it's kinda satisfying to just tear them to shreds, and even slam ghosts onto other ghosts. And setting it up right can initiate a suction with more than one ghost. It's a bit satisfying to use, but overall I think it definitely simplifies combat. The most basic and frequent ghosts you'll be encountering, the goobs, have 100 health, meaning at least 80% of their health can be shaved off by just spinning the slam move, which barely takes any time to initiate, meaning these guys are a joke, frankly. There are a few other optimal techniques you can learn, like continuing to fight against the ghost until its health is actually low enough to kill it with slams, or letting go before the last slam so the ghost is still stunned, allowing you to start sucking it up again for even more damage. But overall, this game definitely had the easiest and most shallow combat, which disappointed me. Comparing the power surge to the slam move, it may sound similar at first, as you pull back against the ghost long enough to charge up a move that does good damage, but the power surge had the strategy on when to use it since it had different tiers, and that game also had the jump you could use to evade enemies and reset your surge. Besides suffering from repetitive enemy design, Dark Moon had to restrict itself with its combat since it couldn't match the exhilarating experience of wrestling with the ghosts on the GameCube's excellent analog stick. Ghosts do swerve around more than in Dark Moon, which can be a challenge if you wait to use your slam throw when the ghost is about to escape, but despite having a decent controller, it doesn't match the first game's aggressive enemy encounters. Before slamming, you're mostly just holding back against the ghost. Trying to suck up ghosts was much more of a wild ride in the first game, especially with how you can get risky and more aggressive for a greater reward. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that the game of tug-of-war between you and the ghost is more basic than the first game, which I thought was disappointing. Once again, enemies also don't feel very aggressive. They were always floating towards you in the first game, which made them a threat even if they weren't attacking. Also, ghosts interrupting your sucking is pretty rare, since it's so easy to just use the slam when another ghost gets close to not only cancel out their attack but deal a shit ton of damage. At least in Dark Moon, ghosts would drag you all over the place and you had the ability to dodge at the cost of resetting your power surge. Nothing like that is in Luigi's Mansion 3. You do have the burst ability by pressing both triggers, which can blow ghosts away if they're too close, which is a good defensive maneuver. When it comes down to the act of capturing ghosts, I just don't really see what the challenge of combat is with this overpowered move. Once you have the ghost trapped in your suction, finishing the job is usually very easy, especially with the goobs. Yeah, let's talk about the types of ghosts now. Most of the archetypes are borrowed from Dark Moon. The goobs are the basic enemy type, but don't put up much of a fight and are easy. Every now and then they have different properties like a weapon or something, which can usually be disarmed by using one of your abilities like the burst or just using the poltergust. Honestly, those variants felt more interesting in Dark Moon. The hammers are the big strong guys. They pack more of a punch have a lot more health and are overall harder to capture. That's the exact same description I gave to the Slammers in Dark Moon because they're pretty much the same. Slinkers mostly prioritize ambushing Luigi and messing you up when fighting other ghosts, just like the sneakers in Dark Moon, Also, the last two I mentioned require you to get behind them to actually start capturing them, which I don't like, but the Slinkers actually try to escape when you try getting close to them. Oozers are just like hiders in Dark Moon. They hide in furniture, so interact with it to catch them, and whenever you're fighting other ghosts, they may pop out and throw junk at you. Trappers mostly exist as an obstacle that's used like 3 times in the entire game, where they ambush you in front of doors so you call your good friend Gooigi to save you from literal death. But yeah, I don't really count the trappers when thinking about all the ghosts to encounter during battles. Also, there are these mini goobs and mini hammers, which I just don't get the point of. You flash them and that's it, suck them up, they have no health. Because of that, they attack in very large numbers, but they still don't pose any challenge, so they just don't have a good reason to exist. Yeah, the hallway ghosts had 0 health as well, so capturing them wasn't hard, but they served as obstacles in the hallways, like the ceiling ghosts who would drop bombs, or the bowling ghosts. They weren't very challenging either, but their existence made more sense. Just like Dark Moon, the common ghosts to encounter are lacking in variety, frankly. Even if combat takes a back seat, I just don't understand how Luigi's Mansion 1 was at least twice as short as these games, but had better variety in the common ghosts. That game had 3 tiers of the basic ghosts that attack and stuff, as well as 2 grabbing ghosts, the garbage can ghosts, the shy guy ghosts, the elemental ghosts, Mr. Bones, and the hallway ghosts with 0 health. Luigi's Mansion 3 basically only has 4 types of ghosts to encounter, and frankly, I felt like it took too long for them to introduce the other types like the Slinkers, so for a while it's just goobs and maybe a few hammers every now and then. I guess you could say Dark Moon blew its load too early since you see every ghost before the halfway point, but this game takes too long to get more interesting, so in this case there's one obvious solution. Give me more enemies to fight for fuck's sake, besides just goobs. Even if they do have a few different properties, we still needed more types. But one thing this game's combat definitely has over Dark Moon are the bosses. Well, to be more specific, this game doesn't have the portrait ghosts and bosses like in the first game. The portrait ghosts were basically turned into boss fights. Overall, most of them were good. None of them were too challenging since you get a lot of health.
But I mean, hey, the less time I spend listening to this horrible heartbeat sound, the better!
Most of them were fun to figure out how to take down, and they also love all the unique characteristics these guys have and how it takes advantage of the wacky settings these floors are on. These guys nailed the spectacle even more than the first game with its weird arenas. I already mentioned the kaiju fight on the movie studio floor, which mostly prioritizes the spectacle, but I must repeat, it was fucking amazing. Man, there are just so many memorable fights to talk about. On the great stage floor, you can fight a penis who has many attacks to cycle through, and I love how he possesses a piano. Name another game where you can beat the shit out of a piano with a plunger that comes out of your vacuum cleaner. Only in Luigi's Mansion 3. Also, he's very expressive. I love this guy, honestly. The fight on the castle floor takes place in this cool coliseum, although everything else is kind of simple. You fight the skeleton of a T-Rex in this abandoned museum where it's more of a puzzle to figure out how to reveal his weak point, but the idea is so cool. There are a few other floors that only exist to house boss fights, like this pirate-themed restaurant where you get to fight a shark ghost that possesses a pirate ship and fights you like that, as well as a disco-themed floor where you fight the DJ along with some groovy music and ghosts that dab. Most of them use their unique gimmicks on their floors in fun ways, like the Sand Pharaoh boss where you have to suck up all the sand to expose them while dodging attacks. Clem from the boiler room also makes you fight him in the floaty, which is fun but nothing all too complicated. If only I had the idea to use Gooigi here, because running all the way back up and trying to capture him was frustrating because I was just being a dumbass. Although in the boss against the magician ghosts, I did have an Epic Gamer 200 IQ idea to use Gooigi for guessing which one is real so Luigi wouldn't take damage. This fight was alright, the rest of the floor is about magic tricks and stuff, so having to guess like this is fitting. If you're a fan of Toad Houses and New Super Mario Bros, you're gonna love this fight. But whoever was turning off the lights in this fight, fuck you. For the penultimate boss, you fight Helen Gravely, which was kinda good. You have to balance dodging attacks with Luigi as you deactivate lasers underground as Gooigi, which was a really cool idea, but they moved really slowly so there wasn't much happening on Luigi's side, so it was a rather calm for a boss. This feels like more of an intense set piece you'd stumble upon during exploration. So yeah, these bosses are much better than Dark Moon's in every way, including the structure. The possessor ghosts in that game are boring since there wasn't any challenge to capturing them, and it always made you progress through 3 phases. There's nothing wrong with this boss structure since if done right, it can allow for difficulty that naturally ramps up, but in the first game, I liked how the amount of health you'd shave off each time was based on how good you were at having a seizure on the analog stick. Although that game's combat has a much higher skill ceiling, there are still some challenges to trying to deplete as much HP as possible. Well, the final boss against King Boo does follow this structure, and it's not bad. King Boo has a handful of attacks to go through, and it gets more overwhelming as he clones himself. I don't really get why they put a timer on the last phase and you have to wait a good while for a chance to attack. It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Also, I beat it with like 3 seconds left. I was fucking screaming. So overall, the ghost busting in this game didn't really take advantage of the hardware as I hoped after playing Dark Moon, so in the end I thought this game's combat was the weakest of the trilogy, to be honest. Besides bosses being much better and frankly one of the game's highlights, all its other issues weren't really fixed. The lacking variety in common ghosts still remains, and there is almost no challenge in the act of capturing ghosts. They went kinda overboard with the slam move since it makes any other enemies not threatening and filling it up is quick and easy. I had high hopes this game could fix Dark Moon's problems, and it's sad to see how lacking it is. The slam is a little satisfying to use, but looking at it critically, it makes everything else too easy. One thing I also noted about Luigi's Mansion 3's combat is that it wasn't very rewarding like the first game or even Dark Moon. So let's discuss money as a whole and how it was handled following Dark Moon. In the first game, the idea of collecting money served as your high score and contributed to a post-credits rank, and everything in that game's short runtime revolved around getting as much as possible. It took me a couple of playthroughs to really catch on, but it's something I adored about the game. I doubt I'll ever get tired of replaying this game. Dark Moon had money as a reward for exploring as well as doing well in combat, and it could be used to upgrade your power surge and the dark light because I ran out of ideas. It also contributed to your mission rank, which didn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. Luigi's Mansion 3 brings back the ranking system at the end of the game, since after Luigi defeats King Boo, all of the ghosts, yes, all of them help out Gadd and they build a new mansion with all your money. However, I didn't really think it worked well in the context of this game. The ranking is something you can work towards on like your first playthrough, but the best part about money in the first game is how much replayability it added, and I didn't think this game was very replayable. It took me 13 hours to complete, which is like 3 times as long as Luigi's Mansion 1. The ranks also don't do anything, which has more of a stigma in this 13-hour journey compared to the first game you could beat in like 4. Money can be spent in Gadd's lab for these items, but most of them weren't really worth anything to me. Also, buying items would subtract from your endgame ranking, so why would you want to do that? I don't need the gold dog bone since you get chances to regenerate all over this game, and the boos and gems aren't really worth caring for, which I can explain later. Throughout my playthrough, I had this thought in the back of my head about how poorly money is balanced in this game. Frankly, I feel like at least 95% of my total money count just came from interacting with every object in every single room I could. I will say though, this game's lighting makes money look super shiny and makes me just want to go and collect it, but after a certain point, it got exhausting and a little tedious to examine every object just for money because that shit is fucking everywhere in this game. And you know, there's nothing wrong with rewarding the player like this. The first game had this with the golden mice and the gems that were actually fucking worth money, but you also got valuable pearls for mastering the combat and getting gold frames on the portrait ghosts. There were also the speedy spirits, which were hard to find and hard to capture, and the blackout especially adds risk in trying to collect money. Dark Moon would also give you an entire paycheck from examining certain objects, but I'd say it was balanced out by all the money you get from sucking out multiple ghosts at once. During combat, there were like a couple of coins laying around. I think I saw maybe 1 gold bar after defeating 3 at once. Not to mention, combat is very easy, so there's no incentive to get better like the skill ceiling of the first game. The gold ghosts do return in 2 and 3, but capturing them is very easy, so half the challenge of the speedy spirits was lost. So collecting money in this game is just about exploring every nook and cranny as you vacuum up everything in sight, which got tiring after a while. And it's not balanced at all because doing well in combat isn't rewarded. When I didn't get the A rank, I just said to myself I didn't examine every speck of dust, and combined with this game's moderate length, I have no real incentive to want to go back to this game again and replay it. In the first game, I was getting better at each playthrough, becoming more and more knowledgeable about the mansion's secrets. Dark Moon didn't really care about the factor of rupee value, and while this game tried, I think it ultimately failed. Collecting money isn't as fun since there isn't a lot of room to grow as the player. It's about how willing you are to inspect everything in sight for a possible reward. Not every game has to be replayable, but as a Luigi's Mansion game, I wish it was better. But if you feel like wasting more of your time, you can try going after the gems. They're hidden all throughout the floors, just like Dark Moon, but I think the structure of 6 per floor is much more manageable. Dark Moon was picky with which missions had which gems. These are another reward for those players who like to go off off the beaten path, but there isn't a significant reward, they're just kinda there. Apparently, if you collect all of them, you get a skin for your suction shot. Damn, I really gotta collect these now for a new plunger. Booths are also back as a collectible that I didn't care about. There's one on each floor, and finding them is like the first game, but less fun. You have to pay attention to the controller's vibrations to determine how hot or cold you are, and after that, you have to make your guess and risk the boo moving away, which gets annoying. Catching it is quite similar to Dark Moon, but you slam the shit out of it instead. Capturing boos also gives you more money than you'll ever dream of in actual combat. That isn't that bad, but the thing that kills boo collecting for me is the fact that on your first visit through a floor, you can't find the boo for some reason. So at that point, you actually have to backtrack through floors, which is a pretty stupid idea. Some floors, namely floor 7, aren't very backtrack friendly since this one is linear and vertical. A great choice for a Polterkitty mission, huh? Your reward for boo collecting also isn't very compelling, a boo flashlight. Luigi doesn't even need a fucking flashlight in this game, everything is so bright. Yeah, these are just a little side activity you can't complete, so I can't get too mad. In fact, I don't have much of an issue with the gems themselves, but they lack the meaningful rewards they had in the first game. Both of these collectibles would net you some more money, but instead, this game just relies on you tediously examining every room to get the highest rank. So despite trying to dip into the first game's replayability, I think it failed. So, in conclusion, Luigi's Mansion 3... Wait, we're not done yet. Guys, I'm sorry I forgot to talk about ScareScraper last time. Well, okay, I knew it existed, but I never really heard anyone talk about it, so I didn't think it was worth mentioning. But a few of you guys didn't like that, so I'll talk about the multiplayer game modes for a bit, since apparently people did talk about ScareScraper and Dark Moon. And to make you guys happy, I also went back to ScareScraper and Dark Moon to compare the two games. Never thought I'd come back to this game, huh. In Dark Moon, ScareScraper is a gauntlet of floors with randomly generated room layouts where you can tackle one of 3 game modes. Hunter, where the objective is to catch all the ghosts. Rush, where you must locate the exit before time runs out. Not really a fan of this one. And Polterpup, where the Polterpups zero fans can relish in this game mode, all about tracking down all the Polterpups on the floor. In my opinion, the main one worth your time would be the Hunter one. But even then, on the normal difficulty, I felt like the ghost types were too simple. Mostly just greenies and maybe like 1 sneaker and 2 slammers. The time limits on the floors were also pretty generous for single player. As you progress, you can collect money to upgrade your power surge, which was neat how you can get stronger as you progress. If you like Dark Moon's combat, you'll like this. I thought it was good in that game, but either way, not all the game modes are my thing, so I don't see myself returning to this often, especially since no one is really playing online anymore. In Luigi's Mansion 3, ScareScraper was fleshed out when it comes to gameplay, but they also removed some other features like the difficulty selection and getting to choose which mode you play. Now they all appear in random orders, and the only returning objective is capture the ghosts. Now we have a few new ones like collect the money, escort the toads, and defeat the crows. Yeah, these guys are super challenging. The floors also felt much bigger, and the time limits were more demanding for individual players like me. And if you run into one of these traps, just close the game. My teammates just didn't really feel like saving me. I did play a bit with people online, and I can say that it's better that way. It feels like it was designed around teamwork with these bigger floors, and for the boss at the end, you actually get to fight Boo Losses, who shares a lot of attacks from King Boo's fight. But once you shoot the bombs into his mouth, all the boos appear, and you and your team have to suck all of them up, just like Boo Losses. Except nowhere near as difficult as in the first game.
Man, you guys suck at this game. No, it's because I was playing with Joy-Cons. It's not my fault.
Overall, ScareScraper and Luigi's Mansion 3 can be good fun. Despite thinking Dark Moon had better mechanics, I enjoyed this one's version of ScareScraper more because it feels like it really found its footing in this one. Also, it's not afraid to throw in harder types of ghosts earlier on, unlike Dark Moon. Too bad the ghosts themselves aren't really challenging regardless. So if you have friends to play with, you can have a good time. Also, the main campaign has co-op with Gooigi by your side, but I didn't test it out. I'm guessing it would just be the equivalent of always having Gooigi spawned in, and y'all can move simultaneously, which may make the game a little more fast-paced, I don't know. I also didn't get any friends with me for Scream Park, the other multiplayer mode, because it's local only. It doesn't seem that interesting either. Just play a few minigames and compete to get the most points. They include capturing the most ghosts, in case you thought this game didn't have enough goobs, shooting the targets, and collecting the most money. Yeah, no thanks, I'll just stick to ScareScraper, or even better, Mario Party. The ScareScraper isn't something I'm dying to see return in the next game, but it's harmless. I know it has its fans, but maybe that development time could have gone to polishing up the main campaign, specifically revamping the combat, I don't know. So yeah, ScareScraper was actually pretty fun if you have the right group to play with. You guys happy now? So that's about it for Luigi's Mansion 3. This was an interesting game for me, but I'll preface this conclusion by saying I had a pretty good time with this game. Exploration and puzzle solving was great due to all the brand new ideas they had. Luigi and the other characters filled this game with personality, and there are so many memorable boss fights. When it comes to what Dark Moon did best, i.e. being an exploratory action-adventure game, Luigi's Mansion 3 does it even better than that game. But when it comes to what the first game did best, like its exhilarating and technical combat, as well as being a beautifully replayable experience, this third installment fumbles. Fighting ghosts just lacked a good challenge, as well as the other issues from Dark Moon, like not enough variety. And the quest to rack up as much money as possible becomes tedious due to poor balancing, and not understanding what made money so fun to collect in the first game. So looking at it as a sequel to the beloved first game, it's still not very faithful like Dark Moon. But as a sequel to Dark Moon, it's a good sequel, and I'd say it's better than Dark Moon. That game may have a stronger combat system, and a better soundtrack, just to throw that out there, but it excels at what it prioritizes, being a fun and memorable action-adventure game. It does a much better job at solidifying a new direction for the series than Dark Moon did. This is a damn fine title in the Switch's lineup. I'd say it has enough of its own great qualities to be an okay choice for your first Luigi's Mansion game. I'm sure it was like that for a lot of people, in fact. And as of now, this is the latest installment in the Luigi's Mansion series. Despite being hyped up to bring back more elements from the first game, it really didn't. So it makes it seem that this original philosophy used to make the masterpiece that is Luigi's Mansion was abandoned. Next Level Games did do a decent job making the sequels, 3 especially. However, I still believe there are some ways to find the perfect middle ground between 1 and 3. I have some ideas that I think are interesting, but I'll save that for a hypothetical video discussing where Luigi's Mansion 4 could go. So yeah, this was an interesting game. As a hardcore Luigi's Mansion fan, I still want a proper sequel to the first game, but I can't deny the improvements it had over Dark Moon and just how much fun I had playing through this one.